Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Big Fight. One of the subjects that we've been talking about a lot, especially since the present government has come in, is on the entire question of an idea of India. Now, there has been an idea of India which has endured ever since independence. Some used to say it's a Nehruvian idea of India, and others said, don't just link it with Jawaharlal Nehru. That is the idea of India, and it's an idea of India that is going to endure. Are we changing that idea? If so, is it for the good or for the bad? And what should the idea of India be? Is there something which is as a concept which we can have called the idea of India? So those are some of the things that we're going to be discussing here. We've got a range of some of the most powerful thinkers in the country right now to help us navigate us through all the permutations and combinations that are possible. So let me start off by welcoming Sudhanshu Trivedi, of course, senior BJP leader, spokesperson of the BJP, Mani Shankar Iyer, a very senior Congress leader. Great to have you with us. Gardner Harris is going to give us a perspective from the outside. He's the South Asia correspondent of the New York Times. Yogendra Yadav, member of the Aam Aadmi Party, but also a noted political analyst. It's good to have you with us. Harsh Mandar, social worker and writer. And it's a great privilege, sir, to have you with us, Professor S. Irfan Habib, who's an author and a historian. And in a short while from now, we'll also be going across and hearing from perhaps somebody who could be said to be representing industry, Sumant Sinha, Chairman and CEO of Renew Wind Power, and Dr. J.K. Bajaj is joining us as well, Director, Center for Policy Studies in Chennai. Now, if I can just kick-start this, when you're talking about the idea of India, and especially when you start talking about what was called the Nehruvian consensus, there were two aspects of this. One was social, religious, secular, we must be an inclusive society, we must be a pluralistic society. That was the social, the cultural, the religious aspects of it. And then there was an economic aspect of that also, at least the Nehruvian idea, which I think we've already moved reasonably far away from the idea of state-controlled, the commanding heights of the economy, and we may have moved away from that. But let me just get all of you. Are either of those symbolic of an idea of India? And is the idea of India shifting now?
India is the only surviving civilization of the ancient world, so idea of India is an eternal idea. Whatever Mahatma Gandhi has said, whatever Jawaharlal Nehru has said, nothing but the reminiscence of our original idea of India. Like in socio, cultural and religious aspect, which is very much in news these days. India is the only country in the world which is having all the religions of the world. Even Zoroastrians who have vanished from all over the world, they are here. Only country in the world which has not done any discrimination with the Jews. All the 72 sects of Islam are there. The oldest church is here. And forget about the indigenous religions. It means this is not created by Nehruji or any others. It is the centuries old tradition.
So you're agreeing that the pluralistic and inclusive aspect of it is part of the idea of India?
One aspect which we lost. Like in 1959, agriculture universities were formed. IITs were formed. It was good. Indian Institute of Sciences was formed. It was good. But just after 40, 50 years, we are again focusing on organic farming. If we would have courage or self-confidence in our knowledge, we would have established the agriculture universities with Indic studies, science and technology, like some other things like Ayurveda and other things. By this time, we would have been standing far apart from rest of the world as far as the technology is concerned.
Mani Shankar Iyer, he said the idea of India is what has come down through the centuries. It's a civilisational construct. He did add that there is an inclusive, very strong inclusive element in that.
Yeah, I'm quite startled to hear him, and I'm delighted to agree with him. It's absolutely true that the idea of India is not a Nehruvian invention. Nehru succeeded in, as he called it, walking down the trackless centuries to discover that the essence of India was that its unity lay in its diversity, and that it is in the celebration of this diversity that we are able to live together. There was an idea that was promoted in the 1920s that was the direct opposite of this. That was the concept of Hindutva as propagated initially by V.D. Savarkar. And as far as I know, that challenge to the ancient India of India, the ancient idea of India, has persisted for nearly 100 years, and it still exists today. So actually what we have is two opposing ideas of India. One, the idea of India as a Hindu Raj, which therefore, as a Hindu Rashtra, which therefore deserves a Hindu Raj, and the other, which sees which celebrates the fact of our diversity and therefore says, let us all go together instead of the one trying to dominate the other. Now, since Sudhanshu has kept away from Hindutva, I welcome him to my family. The minute you give him the opportunity to reveal the truth to the party, then I think we can begin this argument.
Okay.
He's talked about the Hindutva. The entire inclusive concept of idea of India emerges from Hindutva. I would like to quote just one example. In every civilization, there is a demon, there is a god, a consistent fight in between. But it is only Hindutva in which the Ravan, which was considered a demon when he was lying on deathbed, Bhagwan Ram has sent his brother, go, respect his knowledge and stand on his feet. This is the utmost example of respect of your opponent, which is nowhere available in the world. And second thing, he has not annexed the kingdom of Ravan. That's why India is the only country in the world which never went for invasion.
Okay.
And Hindutva is the only,
I'm
if
going
you
to come
consider
back.
a religion in the world,
I don't want to
which respects
restrict this
others.
entire debate to just Hindutva versus, versus other concepts. Let me just get everyone else to assess. Gardner, when you looked at India from outside, before you were being posted out here, when you were thinking about the idea of India, what came to your mind? What is the idea of India?
So the idea of India outside of India is fairly clear, it seems to me. It's only when you actually get to India that it's utter nonsense. The more you travel, I think the longer I've been here, the less I know India. But there is...
So what was your conception first, before you came?
I think the conception outside of India is this very northern India, this very sort of Hindi-centered idea of India of, Hindu, peaceful, and fairly parochial. India is a fairly inward-looking society. And Nehruvian economics and foreign policy and all of that is about keeping India really kind of separate from the world. India, obviously, South Asia, has the least amount of trade amongst its neighbors of any place on the planet. The notion of the non-aligned movement, which is really sort of lived past its prime, persists now. And unfortunately, what I think is interesting about this argument about a Hindutva is that, in fact, Modi has been far less radical, both socially, which is a good thing, but economically, which is a bad thing, than I think a lot of people predicted. He is continuing the consensus movement in both foreign policy, economic policy, and social policy that started with Nehru. And I think the concern is that the politics is sort of going very slowly, and India's demographics, you've got a lot of young people here. 12 million young people are going to come of age this year. There will be fewer than 1 million jobs for them, and that's a concern.
Moving slowly away from the old idea of India, according to you, or at least what used to be the consensus, is a good thing when it comes to the social aspects of it, a bad thing when it comes to the economic aspects of it. I'm going to come back, and that's an interesting thought. I'm going to come back to the others on it. But Yogendra, first your overall views on the idea of India.
Let's disentangle the idea from its institutional expressions and from its policy implications. Policies change every second or third year. Institutional expressions change every 10 years. But the core idea of India, to my mind, comprises three things. One, the audacious idea that democracy could be established in conditions of severe disadvantage, lack of education, that democracy could actually mean empowerment of the last person's ability to decide for themselves.
And that's one aspect. So I'm going to come to each of your three. So in that aspect, there's no doubt. Nobody questions it. I've yet to come across somebody in this country who says that, India should not be democratic or we should move away from that idea.
No, but in substance, we have moved towards a republic where effectively the choice that we are being offered is between dynastic rule and authoritarian rule. So there is a challenge, but it's not being challenged on the face of it.
There are other options. You can set up another party and you can fight. If people don't vote for that other party, that's okay. That's also democracy. They may choose to prefer dynastic rule or authoritarian rule or any other type of rule that they want, but that's the people's will. It's still a democratic
all these
expression.
Three, we have to look for challenges which would not come from the front door. They usually come from the back door.
Okay, but you said democracy, which is the other.
The second is development, which would wipe the tears, as Mahatma Gandhi said, of the last person, which means an ability to think of a model of economic development which may not be a repetition of what Europe and North America did for the last 200 or 300 years. That's again an audacious idea. Whether it goes through public sector, private sector, these are minor decisions to be taken. And the third is the idea that we celebrate diversities. Diversity is not a problem, It is a strength of our civilization that we build on it. These are the three core ideas that constitute the idea of India on which the modern Indian Republic rests. Take away any one of these and this is not India, it's something else.
All right. Harsh?
In India's freedom struggle was not just a battle against colonialism, it was very much a battle about what India would be when she was reborn as a free country. And I think there were three ideas, as has already been said. There was Mahatma Gandhi represented that idea of India, but also more radical expressions by Ambedkar and the left and so on. But that idea that it would not matter whether you belong to this faith or that faith or were of this caste or spoke that language, you were fully an equal citizen, an equal human being, equal citizen, and you'd have the full space to follow your beliefs, your way of life. I think that was central, and that the state would not discriminate between people based on this. There was the Hindutva, the idea of the Hindu Mahasabha, which said no, minorities can stay in India, religious minorities in particular, but they would have to accept the subordination, the cultural, economic, social, political subordination to the majority. And I think that is the resurgence of an idea that never went away. And then there was, of course, the idea of Pakistan as well, which was the idea that no, we are not safe in our differences. We can be safe only when we are the same, and same is defined in terms of your religious identity. And therefore, I think the idea of Pakistan was safety, security, development only in our samenesses. The idea of India was safety and security and development only in our respect of our differences. The two very other quick points that I wanted to make. One was that this is an ancient idea, it's a civilizational idea, but it's not a Hindu idea specifically, because some of its best protagonists, Ashok was not Hindu, Akbar was not Hindu, Kabir, one can wonder, Nanak. These are all expressions, so I think it was civilizational across religious identities. Also that it was not anti-religion, because the best protagonists in the freedom struggle, Mahatma Gandhi and Abdul Kalam Azad, for instance, were deeply religious and deeply secular, whereas Jinnah and Savarkar was a self-professed atheist, and Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life. The people who fought for a religious state actually were not religious. The people who fought for a secular idea of India were. One last thing, though the idea of equality was not part of the idea of India civilizationally. The strange combination of accepting difference but inequality, I think, is the paradox. And there, I think there was a radical new idea which Ambedkar and Nehru brought in, which was of the welfare state.
Yeah, fine. So I'm going to actually come back to that, because you're right, civilizationally, the idea of equality or socialism, or call it what you want, was not necessarily something which has always been there, not just in India but across the world. Actually, that did come more in the last century and a half. That was where I guess the influence of Marx and other such figures would come in. Professor Habib.
Nehru actually inherited a legacy of freedom struggle, and what he represented was not totally just Nehruvian. He represented the ethos which we cultivated for 60, 70 years, of which Gandhi was a central part. Despite all the differences they had amongst between them, Nehru represented the whole ethos collectively. And the cabinet which he formed to actually build a new India in 1947, the whole of 1950s, which I call a definitive decade of the 1950s, which saw maximum development, was a cabinet which represented people like Maulana Azad, people like Sardar Patel, and all of them who actually had a central, Ambedkar of course, and even Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. So diverse people from diverse political backgrounds, despite being in the Congress party, ideologically different, used to think differently. But Nehru took all of them together and had an idea of India which all of them shared. The very core of that idea, which is, I think, is under some pressure or challenge today, is the idea of pluralism. So it is not actually Nehru's idea which is under threat. It is actually India's idea of plurality, of composite culture, which we have all cherished for centuries, is somehow being seen as under threat.
Dr. Bajaj, let me get you in from Chennai there, the Director for Policy Studies. Is there a questioning of one of the fundamental tenets and the fundamental ideas of India right now, which is that India has to be a pluralistic society where everybody is equal? It's not that one particular region or culture or religion will dominate and everyone else will have to be subordinate to that. That, at least the panel here has been saying, is a crucial part of the concept of India. Is that under challenge now?
There is an Indian civilization with a long history, and any nation is built on the backbone of its civilization. It's not culture, it is our civilization, and pluralism is part of that civilization. And if it is to survive in India, it will survive as a part of that civilization. That Mahatma Gandhi was very clear, that Nehru was not very clear about.
No, so let me ask you, we get that there's been an Indian civilization, which is obviously what the country and the nation is based on. That's what the idea of India is also based on. Again, we get that. The difference starts to come when you say that that Indian civilization or the idea of India is therefore a Hindu idea, a Hindi idea, a northern idea, a northern civilization. That's when the problems start to come in.
Idea of Indian civilization is of course pan-Indian. There are people who have come from abroad, they have moved from the northernmost part to the southernmost part, from the east to the west, and they have commented that you go anywhere in India, there are differences in dress, there's differences in food, there are differences in way of talking, but wherever you are, you get a clear, distinct idea that you are in India.
I wasn't just meaning pan-Indian in a geographical sense. I was also asking about pan-Indian in a diversity sense, in different people, different religions, different languages, things like that.
Pan-Indian in the way the Indians think. The pan-Indian, the way even a Indian Muslim thinks, is very, very different than the way non-Indian Muslim will think. It's pan-Indian in this sense.
Fine. I don't think anybody would be not proud of the pan-Indianness as long as it's not, I think it's a question whether it's inclusive or not.
No, I have some serious disagreements with this whole idea of that all Indians think alike. Indian Muslim and non-Indian Muslim will think differently. Obviously, Indian Muslim is not just Muslim, he's Indian first. So this whole issue of looking at Indian Muslim as somebody different is actually absolutely bogus. We shouldn't actually get into it. That is the problem, which actually leads us into all sorts of other problems further.
As you all were saying earlier, that if the idea of India is that everyone has to be treated equally, irrespective of what you believe in, whether you're a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian or you worship.
I know
soda bottles.
Jitendra's idea, because we have discussed these over the years.
My real worry is when we talk about a homogeneous, being Indian, being homogeneous. I think being Indian is its diversity. Arunachal has 150 languages and tribes. It is the most diverse state even within India, and it is equally Indian. I think that recognition and the contrast with the debates that are happening in Europe. In Europe, in France, starting with France and then Scandinavia, etc., the idea of being secular would be that a girl wearing a hijab would not be welcome in company like this. In India, that is the opposite of the idea of India. In India, the defense of her right to wear it would be our idea of secularism. I think these are two very contrasting ideas.
Actually, that's a really interesting point which I want to throw up to everybody, that we should not aim, from what I understand what Harsh is saying, and Sudhanshu, let me get you on it. What Harsh is saying is, don't aim for any homogeneity. Don't try and say, well, this is something which India is. Instead, recognize that India is, in a sense, like a patchwork quilt, where you will have hundreds and thousands of languages and dozens of religions and all sorts of differences, but that is exactly what makes India India. Don't try and blend it all into a melting pot.
Actually, the problem is started. There is a one idea of India, another idea of India, which is the legacy of colonial mindset, which Macaulay tried to put and infringe in the Indian mind, which was after independence has been augmented further by the Marxist school of thought.
The English speaking and
Yes.
But again, his idea would be, fine,
then,
within India, you should be as free to speak in Hindi as you should be free to speak in English or German for that matter, Sanskrit.
You are going further back into history. I was talking of Gandhi.
No. In this aspect, we have to have some couple of sentences of history. In eternal Indian concept, which you today term as Hindu concept, the people was just following no religion. They were having a way of life. The religion was with the religious heads, whether you are Shaiv, Vaishnav, Shak, Jain, Buddha, Sikh. If you go in a Gurdwara, it's not a restriction that you cannot go in the temple. If you go in a Jain temple, there is no restriction that you cannot go in a Bodh Math. The problem started after Britishers. When you go into a church, then you have to be in the church. You cannot go to mosque. This is the problem. That's why.
It doesn't necessarily
It's
the
just utter
case.
nonsense.
I've
What
been
is
to
going
churches
on?
lots of times.
By just following any religious sects, the religion was not changing in ancient India.
Okay.
And there are certain conspiracies. As Harshmandarji has said, Ashok was not a Hindu. I would like to ask him, there are 180 inscriptions of Ashok, huge religious texts. Just show me a single sentence in which Ashok has written, I am a Buddhist. He has not written.
Okay.
Like in Christianity, it is baptism.
Trying to
In
come back.
Buddhism, it is Upsampada. Who
Perils
has
of
performed
spending a lot of time in
Upsampada?
history.
So this type of
Radha,
conspiracies
Radha,
has
you
been
want to say?
Well, I
created.
just think it's worth bringing in.
And one more thing I would like to say. One more thing.
Let's just get him in for a second.
What happened in the United States is there was a fundamental reorientation of political parties around the soft racism of the Republican Party, right? Once the Republicans really got sort of very soft demonization of blacks, they then got the majority in the U.S. from 1968, Richard Nixon, on until the beginning of Barack Obama. I think what the BJP really has is sort of a soft communalism, right? That they sort of send out little dog whistles that, you know, we're all together, but Hindus are a little bit better. And they make explanations in places like this with a lot of smart people that it'll all be okay. But the Muzaffarnagar riots, you know, separating out the Muslims from the Jats, separating the Muslims from the Dalits has been very politically successful for the BJP. But I think that like in the United States, it will remain a soft communalism, and because I don't think the smart people will let it get out of hand. The other thing that they've been, of course, is very sort of soft capitalist. So all of this stuff really is on the margins of Nehruvians. They've gone sort of a little bit outside of the lines that Nehru drew, but not that far, which is both a good thing on the communal side and I think is on a bad thing on the economic side.
That really is the core of it. Gandhi and Nehru could be different, there are all kinds of things. But during the freedom struggle, some overlapping consensus evolved. And that mainstream consensus in India, unlike the European nation state, was diversity is a strength. In India, you do not have to be awkward or uneasy about speaking this language or that, being of this religion or that. This is the core idea of India in celebration of diversity and plurality. What was the mainstream 65 years ago, today is being pushed into being a fringe. And what was called a fringe is now being sought to be brought at the center. And there is a soft majoritarianism which is being peddled. And I fear that this would affect not just the BJP. This actually can affect other parties too. I can already see Congress replicating bits of it. So that is where the real challenge comes. And lest we all feel smug, I mean, some of us may have similar views, but let me add one thing which we must honestly confess. All these great ideas of plurality have to be reinvented every 20 years. Every new generation has to be given a new language to believe in those things. And I think the seculars in India have failed to do so. There is some truth in the deracinated, westernized intellectuals who cannot speak a language to the people of our country, to new generations, and therefore those who looked like lunatic fringe 60 years ago are coming to the center.
Okay.